I'd like to invite onto the stage Christo van der Reed. Could you please put on your camera so I'd like to have a quick chat with you. Can we spotlight Christo? Thank you so much. Good morning, Christo. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Great to see all of you and to meet you online.
Yeah, thank you so much. Before we go into your presentation, I would just like to thank you so much for engaging us, and thanks for your history of thought leadership work. It really means a lot. Just tell us a little bit about yourself real quick. One fun tip that we should know about you before we go into the serious body of your work.
You know, I grew up on a little missionary station in South Africa, and I learned to play piano at a very early age. And so I love to make music. And when I have my friends with me on a Friday and a Saturday evening, and then we make music, and that's who I am. My son is playing for the symphony orchestra. So we have a whole generation of musicians. But
nice.
I find myself now in a whole lot of different spaces, but bringing people together through harmony, that's what my life's purpose is.
Awesome. And then I think we have Frances Frazier as well. We could spotlight Frances. Hi, Frances. How are you?
Good morning. Well, and you?
Good, good. So we want to just quickly welcome you as well. Thank you so much. One fun fact about you. Where are you, by the way, right now?
I'm in Pretoria, although it looks like I'm in the Hicks River.
Yes. Have the two of you guys met before?
No, not yet.
Not yet. I know of Christo, but I haven't met him.
Okay. Christo, do you know of Frances?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, cool. Well, welcome, guys. Thank you so much for the chance to engage you on this wonderful, wonderful topic. Let's just start with, you guys give a little bit of a snapshot of both of your backgrounds for us. Krista, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I as I said, I grew up on a missionary station, went to high school in a little town close by, and then went to university, qualified as a music teacher. And eventually I then joined the business school in Stellenbosch University, completed a couple of modules there on finance and marketing and so forth. And then I decided to pursue a whole new career, and that is in government policy and public leadership. And eventually I landed up with a few institutions where I focused on, ensuring a conducive policy environment for business and for, the entire economic system to find, a space in which it can develop. Because if conducive circumstances do not prevail, you can imagine no entrepreneur will invest his time, his energy, his creativity, his money into such a space. And then I was headhunted to join Agri-SA. So I spent 8 years at Agri-SA and interacting with government locally, also internationally with various role players to ensure that we have a conducive policy environment for food production. And that was indeed a learning curve second to none. I turned 60 last year, and I've decided let's call it a day. And I'm I'm even busier now than ever before since I officially retired. But I plow back in terms of my knowledge, my experience, and so forth.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Frances, a little bit about you, your background, and the work you're doing.
Sure, thanks. Interesting that Christo had a background in the arts. I grew up in Pretoria and I went to Pro Arte. I did ballet and I'm a qualified ballet teacher, so we have something in common there. I then decided that wasn't the route for me, and I studied agricultural economics at the University of Pretoria. Really have a heart in development, and I went into consulting in financial inclusion and enterprise development. Worked for a while in Absa Bank, starting a business unit focused on the informal micro enterprise sector. Then I was headhunted by an NGO that works in the same space in financial inclusion, and had the great experience of managing a team across Southern Africa and the Middle East and North Africa. So traveled quite extensively in that time. And then more recently, I've moved into the trade space. I joined the US Africa Trade Hub, Southern Africa Trade Hub, which is a project that was funded by USAID. That ended in 2022, and I started working for a subsequent project. And just quite recently, I've joined the US Africa Trade Desk, which is a public-private partnership that focuses on trade between Africa and the United States. And I'll talk more to that during the discussion. It's a very exciting venture that's recently been launched.
Awesome. I know, Christo, I think you have a presentation you'd like to go through?
Yeah.
How about we do that quickly, and then we can have some dialogue. So, Francis, do you have a separate presentation as well, or no?
I didn't prepare a presentation.
No problem.
I was planning just to answer some questions from
you. Yeah, sure. We'll do that. So Christo has a presentation. After Christo comes back, we'll actually have some dialogue together about it, okay? So Christo, let's spotlight Christo's presentation, and we'll take it from there.
Right. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So colleagues, I'm currently also working at the University of the Free State as an adjunct professor. Let me just see if I can scroll. Okay, there you go. And it's basically about, an analogy between the world of the bees and the world of agriculture. And you all know that bees do a very important thing, and that's to pollinate. They also produce honey in the process, but that pollination is critical for the fertilization of plants, to carry fruit and seeds and so forth. And then obviously bees need the nectar from flowers to produce honey. In agriculture, I will now use this beehive, bees, pollination as metaphors to illustrate particular principles and lessons on how to build the African agricultural sector. In nature, a beehive is a place of production, but also what is a principal lesson we can learn from it? If the beehive is not conducive, if it is not attractive to the bees will stay away. And it applies to the economic sectors as well, and even the social setting as well. Bees, they are the insects that pollinate and produce honey. And for me, the bees are the typical agropreneurs, the people who risk their savings, apply their time, their knowledge to produce food. Pollination obviously help to pollinate plants. It's the main source for honey production. And in our contracts, obviously it presents the resources, support required, and networking. And then obviously the final product is the honey. Those are the products produced by the bees. And for the farmer, it's the produce that he takes, or he or she takes to the market. And then obviously it needs to be profitable. So I've also served on the board of the Godiso Trust. And I recently visited a farmer in the Northwest, Matiti Holding. It's 100% Black-owned farm business. And I think this is the first lesson. A lot of people think of farming as a part-time project. If you don't approach farming as a business, then you're already on a wrong trajectory. Obviously, it depends on the outcome. If you want to be a subsistence farmer or a gardener, that's something different. But we talk about how to create farming businesses, sustainable businesses. Then it's also not something that can deal part-time. I've never seen a bee working or pollinating flowers on a part-time basis. I've just seen dedicated bees. So you need to be a dedicated farmer. Then obviously you have to be on that farm on a full-time basis. And very, very important, a lot of young people come to me often and say, Mr. Van Rede, I want to farm. I said, have you studied farming? No, but I aspire to have land and I want to farm. I said, first go and acquire knowledge and skills and go and join a farm on a part-time basis. You understand what's happening there. And then obviously before you can enter a commercial farming, you need to have farming experience, either as on the basis of managing a farm, etc. Then financing is critical. In South Africa, I think our current loan book for farmers sits at about 260 billion rand. In other words, we produce food on the back of debt. But at the same time, obviously, there are a lot of instruments to protect the farmer should he or she experience particular setbacks. Then there must be dedicated financial institutions with financial expertise to support the farmer. And then critically, of critical importance is diversification of income streams. Very important principles and lessons that we need to apply in our whole approach. Just to continue further, that's a photo that I took of part of the farm with a pivot system. The farm size is approximately 2,138 hectares. And then there's a list of what is currently being produced: mixed cattle, goats, sheep, white maize, potatoes, sunflower, and so forth. If you then, take that case study, then it tells you one thing. It tells you a very important story that in Africa, we have the farmers. We do have the skills and the knowledge to turn Africa's agricultural fortunes around. But we need to adhere to basic principles. Otherwise, we will run around in circles and we will never get to a point where we can sit back and say, wow, Africa is now a net exporter to the rest of the world. And we obviously have the capacity to feed our own people, because poverty is rife on the continent. So share of the world population, 16.6%, size of the world economy, 2.75%. With all of our resources, you talk about oil, diamonds, gold, land, the ecosystems, the natural environment, but we remain stuck in a poverty trap. Then our share of total world imports, 2.8%. And obviously, we sit with a greater dilemma in the sense that we are steadily urbanizing also as a continent. But if you look at our cities and you look at the conditions in which people live, then poverty, underdevelopment remains a massive challenge. And on top of it, conflict. So if you look at the 2022 macroeconomic risk map, you'll see, and this is a very interesting map. If you look at Africa, look at all those red zones, tells you that we're a continent that is in deep trouble. But if you, for example, take that map and you start analyzing that map in terms of resources, in terms of what we have, then the big question that we should ask ourselves is, why are we not elevating ourselves to the next level? William Blake reminds us, the busy bee has no time for sorrow. So how do we apply that to our own lives? Okay, in terms of human resources, we have a population of 1.7 billion people. Our combined business consumer spending is approximately 6.7 billion. Agriculture makes up 35% of our GDP. It employs about half of its people. We import about 50 billion of agricultural products per year. And then intra-African trade is expected to increase by 574%. And as much as 80% of food production on the continent is from smallholder farmers. So that's the background to our natural or human resources. But if you look at our natural resources, rainfall, I mean, there's parts of Africa that receives rainfall to the extent of 3,000 millimeters per annum. If you look at our major agro-environmental zones, we've got land, we've got a natural environment that is really conducive for production of food. And that's critical because we've got growing populations. That's just a photo that I took recently when I flew past the Orange River in the Northern Cape. Now, that's our driest part of South Africa. But look at what happened along that river. Our agriculture has just massively exploded because of the conducive environment that was created for those farmers to excel. In terms of unused agricultural land, if you look at the 2002 map, you will see there that's quite high in terms of the renewable water sources. That is the same scenario. So huge potential. Obviously, to the south and to the north, we have climatic challenges, and obviously we need to guard against climate change impacting on our resources that we currently have. Hunger is a serious problem. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but as you can see, 278 million people in Africa suffer from chronic hunger. But if you look at this map and you see where the hunger is prevalent, and then the funny thing is, if you look at the previous maps, you also see those are the areas that have the biggest potential for food production at the level that we can just imagine. Currently, low hunger, obviously, moderate hunger in South Africa, Egypt, and some countries to the west of Africa. But we shouldn't take this for granted. Our food security index, as you can see, Africa remains a country where food security is a challenge. Obviously, there's particular geopolitical disruptions and tensions that have impacted severely on the African continent, but I'm not going to go into that. Now, just to come back to the analogy of the beehive, that which is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bees. Marcus Aurelius, the famous Roman philosopher, I mean, that principle is critical when within the context of food production. Our exports from the rest of the world, more than 60% of Africa's exports are destined to Europe and Asia. Then also Africa's imports from the world. So Africa's sources of African fresh produce imports are diversified relative to markets, and North America and Europe are the main regional suppliers of fresh produce to the African continent. Now, I ask myself, how can this be with a continent with so much potential? Then intra-fresh produce trade, as you can see there, South Africa, Morocco, Mozambique, Kenya are main contributors to intra-Africa trade. Also fresh produce, South Africa, a big exporter, apples, table grapes, oranges, pears, and the rest follows. I was recently at the Johannesburg market and was just blown away by the amount of food that is being traded there. Fresh vegetable supplies to Africa, Ethiopia, South Africa, Morocco, Kenya, Egypt. And then a very nice, slogan, when the flower blossoms, the bee will come. And that's should be our underlying approach to attract investment, to unleash the potential of our farmers. Fertilizer exports by country, Russia, we've been quite dependent on Russia, on China, but to what extent can we start producing our own fertilizer with the resources that we have? So Africa has one of the big potassium mines and other, very important elements for fertilizer making. But we have become so dependent on imports from other countries. When the problems broke out in Russia and Ukraine, we suddenly had a problem with pricing of agriculture. Then, very important, agro-processing. We in South Africa, for example, we export our wool. It comes back as shirts, it comes back as clothing. We export our raw iron ore, it comes back as steel. We need to really start focusing on reindustrializing not only South Africa, but Africa. Ghana is an example of a country that has taken steps to boost agro-processing by attracting foreign investment. This is a farm that I visited recently in the Northern Cape, a raisins farm, and our raisins exports have just exploded, and farmers are making money. Then there's a great opportunity for new businesses, but we need to resolve the major barriers to scaling agro-processing. And then obviously our infrastructure remains a big problem. How effective is our harbors? How effective is our road and our rail infrastructure, and so forth? William Shakespeare says the following: he is not worthy of the honeycomb that shuns the hives because the bees have stings. And that is a mentality that we will have to inculcate in government, into our own people, that take up farming as a commercial enterprise. Yes, it's not easy. It's a high risk, but you will really not only contribute to food security on the continent, but you will also be in a position to build a lasting business. Obviously, leading paradigms in food security or the food industry, we've seen population changes, migration, but also significant growth in populations, new geopolitical balances. And I mean, for Africa to remain dependent on others, is wrong. We should be interdependent. That's a different mindset altogether. Then technological innovations. We've seen how AI and all of these things are changing the space for agriculture. We should actually be at the forefront of that. Taking care of our environment. There's no use we destroy the environment, we lose all of our biodiversity, because that is our alternative gold that we should protect and obviously showcase to the rest of the world. Connectivity and information. We've seen how in some countries small-scale farmers had to use connectivity to build their capacity. Recently at Nampo, beautiful equipment there. And key considerations, we've seen how global politics, geopolitics can destabilize the economic environment, and we should actually protect ourselves against it. Levels of hunger are increasing. High-income countries are at this point in time the most food secure, but that's our biggest problem, in the sense that we then sit back and import. What do we import? That's the bigger question, but also what do we lose in the process? We will not only lose jobs, but become dependent on others instead of pursuing an interdependence agenda. Also, food security through national policies is of critical importance, and creating national policies that will create that environment. So key considerations is technology, big data, artificial intelligence, also having a food security strategy policy that would encounter issues of domestic food insecurity. That is something that we will have to address. These are schools in the Western Cape where I live. Look at how they plant, and we learn the kids from an early age to take care of themselves. But how do we ensure that we remain sustainable? How do we ensure that we take care of our environment and our ecosystems, that there is a fine balance between commercial agriculture, small-scale agriculture, and taking care of our environment? Because we need to admit to each other that agriculture, in the process of pursuing agriculture, we also destroy the natural environment. But how do we adapt our practices so that we can ensure long-term sustainability? Now look at this. It was the bumblebee and the butterfly who survived, not the dinosaur. It just shows us how important it is to adapt and to view things holistically. We need to protect our ecosystems. This is the most valuable currency currently for the African continent. And this we need to protect at all costs. Our water resources. We know that water is becoming a serious problem, but also the pollution of water. How do we address that? It was Achim Steiner that said the following: human beings have fabricated the illusion that in the 21st century they have the technological prowess to be independent of nature. Please underline the reality that we are more, not less, dependent on nature's service in a world of close to 7 billion people. And this is where the challenge lies. How do we grow and leverage our natural resources, our human resources, our economic resources, but at the same time take care of environment? And what are the lessons that we can apply, from the world and the ecosystems of bees to our sector? Just last but not least, enough with all the strategic planning. Get out there and kill something. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're on mute,
You're mute.
Timothy.
Thank you, Christo. What I love about this presentation is the export opportunity and the ability to have a system, culture in place that solves South Africa and Africa's own problems. And I'd like to bring in Francis, just to share your perspective on the export opportunity. I know that when you are thinking about, I know that Europe, I think Christo says Europe was the dominant market that Africa exports to. Why not America?
Thanks. Thanks, Timothy. So my role is very much focused on supporting companies to export from the whole continent into the US. And I think the reality is that the US market is quite a difficult market to export to. For different reasons. It's expensive, it's costly, there are lots of requirements that need to be met, and the structure of the market's also very different to what we know here in many of the markets on the continent. There is an importer, there's a warehouser, there's a distributor, there's a broker, there's a retailer. There are all these actors in the ecosystem in the US, and many of them obviously would be charging fees. It's quite difficult to navigate that. And so I think, part of the reason why the US Africa Trade Desk has been established is to try and help exporters to navigate that and to really take advantage of the opportunities, because the opportunities are there. And maybe one thing I could just talk to a little bit about our model is that we're focusing on a demand-led model. Often in this field, donor support goes into developing exporters, growing capacity, providing technical assistance on the supply side, and that's very important. But what's been missing in the past has really been understanding what US buyers want and what they need and where they're having challenges in their own supply chains. And so our model is based on working with US retailers and manufacturers to try to understand where they are facing constraints in their supply chains, and to work with buyers who really want to diversify their suppliers so that they're not so reliant on their traditional markets for products, agriculture being one of them, but not the only one. And so we've worked to sign up the likes of Walmart, Costco, Meijer, H-E-B, Albertsons, Kroger, Macy's, and others to support them in their journey around identifying good, reliable suppliers on the continent and assisting them in terms of that export process so that we can build experience and build confidence, because it's lacking. And I think
so Francis, really quickly, let me just stop you quickly. I just want to make sure for those who are just logging in, I want to ground this conversation so that it's practical, okay? So we just had a presentation by Christo about what's happening in agriculture, the opportunities, the gaps, and the ability to take. By the way, Christo, I don't know, I just discovered I'm a vegan, and I realized that a lot of vegans can't have honey because of bees. And now I'm in like a crisis. Can you help me with this crisis? Because I love honey, but I'm a vegan. So I don't know what to do. I genuinely feel like I may have to give this vegan thing up because of honey. So maybe before the end of this session, we can figure out a way to solve my crisis. But I want to make sure I want to bring these conversations together. So because of what France's role is, I mean, you take a Walmart, for example, they must be importing tons of stuff from all over the world. Costco, all of these brands that they are building relationships with. What do you see, Christo, as a low-hanging fruit, as something that farmers in South Africa could be able to upscale to develop? What are some opportunities there that we should be speaking to Francis about to say, hey, look at your network, maybe not even at the Africa Trade Desk, but we got so many other support partners that we could share with them to say, this is an opportunity for us to partner with them to share agricultural opportunities. What are your thoughts on that?
We must understand South Africa as a dual agriculture system, highly specialized commercial section, obviously, and then you have your emerging. It's also a very controversial word because it's so steeped in particular perceptions. But we've got a particular past that has a sort of advantage, a particular group, and those farmers are the big commercial farmers at this point in time. And they are well organized. Now, that is something that we actually have to focus on first. How do we mobilize farmers and how do we network farmers and bring them together so that they can share resources, that they can pool their money, and when they do large-scale purchases, they benefit from a particular discount. And the commercial farming sector have what we call cooperatives. And they use those cooperatives, obviously, to assist with a whole range of things like funding, like purchasing, etc., marketing as well. So the entire commercial agriculture system is divided into commodities. So we've got the wool growers, we've got the red meat producers, we've got the nuts, pecan nuts, macadamia nuts, we've got the table grape growers, we've got the citrus growers, we've got the poultry association. All of these associations play a fundamental role in, in doing research, in unlocking markets, in addressing policy shortcomings, in empowering, especially new entrants, black farmers into the space, and funding various initiatives in terms of, social development and community development and so forth. So there's a very well organized, and they are to a very large extent independent in the sense that they market their produce all over the world, they expand markets. So they are not my biggest worry. My biggest worry, obviously, is the new generation of black farmers that do not get the financial support that they deserve. We have the land bank that is supposed to fulfill that role. We have also other financial institutions that should fulfill that role.
So let me stop you, Christo.
And then
quickly.
obviously, how do we expand?
Let me stop you quickly because that's what I'm enjoying about how we've designed this. And I have to give a shout out to EmpowerWorks again for setting this up because we have F&B coming up after you, because we do want to have those rigorous conversations about the practical side of getting funded and so forth. I want to bring Francis back in quickly because when you hear Christo speak about, the various levels of opportunity, once we have the farmers equipped and funded and so forth. You mentioned earlier that the regulatory challenges of getting into the U.S., what is being done to kind of break the back of this regulatory monster so that we can access this market?
Yeah. Thanks, Timothy. I'll talk to the regulatory issue, but I also want to just come back to the power of aggregation as well as a second point. So just briefly in terms of regulation, I think it is a real challenge. I want to just give like a few examples. Not a single country on Africa is permitted to export fresh avocados to the US. This South African Avocado Association has been trying to address that for over 17 years. Citrus out of Limpopo and Northwest, same issue. There's huge. They've been negotiating with the government for a very long time. What we are trying to do in that space is to work with our public partner on that. That's Prosper Africa. They're a US presidential initiative that was started under Trump and continued under Biden. Important just because we're in an election period, so it's not linked to any specific administration. And their role is specifically to work on bilateral trade and investment between Africa and the US. There is extremely strong political will to drive that. And I think the other opportunity in this space is obviously the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which makes about 30 countries in sub-Saharan Africa eligible for duty-free access into the US. And these are great opportunities that create that space. We offer a lot of support in terms of trying to understand the regulatory environment through our model and to advise companies in terms of what's required and how to go about addressing those. And I think it's important then that the financial institutions come in, that they're investors that can help companies to go through that journey, because it is an important kind of investment that's required to meet those standards and to meet the regulations of the US market, as would be for Europe and other markets. But they're not exactly the same, and they need to be obviously addressed if companies want to go into the market. But I want to just pick up on Christo's earlier points about this duality of the market, and also just to recognize that we're not only talking about South Africa, we're also talking about other markets where you don't have this huge industrialized commercial agricultural sector or agro-processing sector. And some of the models that I've seen in other countries are very much commercially driven. They're about businesses that see the opportunity of working with 7,000 small-scale farmers, aggregating, sorting, cleaning, packing, and exporting product into markets like South Africa. And I think that power of aggregation works at that level, but it also works for exporters on the continent. Think about a store like Dollar General in the US. I don't know how many people know Dollar General. They've got almost 20,000 stores across the US market. It's huge. If you consider putting a pallet of something into each store in Dollar General, you'll need 1,000 containers. So even as big as commercial farmers are in South Africa and as large as some of the agro-processing
Your network is cutting a little bit.
Oh, my apologies. Let me maybe just...
No problem.
I'm going to just put my camera off and I'll switch over. I just
wanted to give them
highlight the power
I wanted
of
to give them some context. Go ahead. Continue. You can continue. Go ahead.
No problem, Timothy. Over to you. Let me try and sort my network out.
Yeah, I wanted to give them some context into Dollar General. I'm imagining Dollar General is something similar to... What is the close? Does anybody know? I see Swati's on. Swati's traveled a lot in the U.S. What would Dollar General be close to in South Africa?
Okay, bazaars maybe?
Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah, but Dollar General is fairly small in terms of each store size.
And very
but
rural.
It's just a whole lot of them. It's just a whole lot of them. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. All right, go ahead. You sound like, I think you're back.
Okay. Yeah, so I just want to say, there's different models for aggregation, and I think working together and collaborating in different ways becomes critical for us to be competitive. Another good example is that if we can aggregate shipping, we can get better rates, and that's part of what the US Africa Trade Desk offers. Because we're moving so much product, we've got preferential sea and shipping rates. But it's not just about our model of aggregation, it's aggregation in different ways. And then I think the second point in terms of that is also linking back to the point that Christo made in terms of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement or area, and looking at how we work in very structured, intentional regional value chains, because it's far more powerful if we can export through a range of countries, aggregate, add value, not just export raw materials and move products. But we need to really plan carefully around how we leverage regional value chains and not just focus on local issues on their own.
But just to add to what Frans is saying, we have been very good at crafting those regional agreements. You've got the SATU, that's the southern part of SADC, and all of these countries that have agreed to cooperation, working together, building the capacity and so forth. But up to date, very little of those agreements are really implemented. And to a very extent, some people or some countries just decide unilaterally to close borders or to do things that are not really in the spirit of those agreements. And that is also something that we need to address. There's some kind of politically ill will, if I may describe, if there's such a word, that exists, and that we need to address, because we've got all the policies, we've got all the frameworks, the agreements, we've got all the resources in terms of human, natural, etc. But we lack the ability to synergize all of that and to make the most of it.
I see. So somebody has to be driving this kind of aggregation philosophy. Francis, what would you recommend? In all of these conversations, we have extraordinary experts. If I want to connect with the Black Growers Council, for example, in the States, with our farming powerhouses like P.J. Haney, who is fifth generation farmer, and we want to create this kind of collaborative aggregation culture. Is that our role? I mean, do we develop a site here where we are driving that? Because I feel like these summits do a really brilliant job of raising awareness of what some of the opportunities and the gaps are. But somebody needs to drive these core philosophies and engineer connection. We've got brilliant minds on this call. We've got extraordinary, innovative. I know I invited a bunch of these people who have really strong will to make these things happen. So what do we do? What are your thoughts? I mean, you guys are supporting the connections and help access the market. But what do you recommend? Is it a political thing? Is it a private thing? What do you suggest?
My gut says to me that the models of aggregation that I've seen that appear to work best are driven from a commercial perspective. If I think about some of the trading businesses in the likes of Malawi or Mozambique, if I think about the kind of dynamism and kind of commercial orientation and incentives that are needed to get a model to work, I think that there is a role for private commercial actors to enter into aggregation models that can earn profit. But on their own, I think they have their limitations, and that more can be achieved if that's done in partnership with a relevant public actor. And I don't want to sort of overstate the US-Africa trade desk, but in design, that's what it is. It's a private company that is supporting exporters to address all of the difficulties of exporting to the US. But on its own, it would be limited. It has the support of Prosper Africa to help get in front of politically influential people where there are political or regulatory or other constraints that would be limiting. And so I think the power of kind of a combined model is quite strong.
Okay. So do you have a wonderful success story that you can share, or if you're open to sharing it, where you guys have supported or you've seen work from anywhere in South Africa?
Yeah.
Or on the continent?
We've got over $150 million worth of deals that are currently in the pipeline. We launched in March, so we're still quite new. We did announce a deal with the table grape sector in South Africa and Costco in March at the AGOA Forum. Secretary Blinken announced it, which was something which we facilitated, and a deal which we're putting together for over $50 million, which is going to take place over the next couple of seasons. I think to Christo's point, that's in a very large commercial kind of farming context. I think other examples would be one out of Madagascar, where we're working with a company that aggregates across over 7,000 small bean producers. packs, cleans, and we're looking into exporting some of their product into a US retailer as early as February. So yeah, I think it's that power of seeing what's in demand, looking for it on the continent, and then supporting that process of having the product in its correct form at the right price, and ensuring that all the risks and pitfalls that an exporter can face in terms of shipping and forwarding and warehousing and distributing, etc., are handled so that we can build confidence with US buyers and we can make it less risky for exporters on the continent to do business in the US.
Just to add to what Francis is saying.
Thank you. Go ahead, Crystal.
No, there's a lot of these models also being managed and by the commodities organizations themselves. So the wool growers, for example, they've got about 4,000 black wool growers in the Eastern Cape. They've done a lot of work over many years to put in shearing sheds, also wool classification systems, making sure that the quality of the wool through the right DNA, for example, is produced, and those farmers are now, as a collective, exporting their wool to China and other parts of the world. The same with Raisins SA, the same with the citrus producers. So there's a lot of these success stories based on the aggregation model. I'm also involved with PepsiCo, the Godiso Trust, and they have been building the capacity of approximately 50 farmers that are now suppliers of particular products to PepsiCo. So there's a range of these initiatives all over South Africa. But just to come back to something else, I think if we really want to grow the agriculture sector in South Africa, we need to address the issues of infrastructure. It's no use you have these products, it's ready to export, but your harbors are not working effectively. Your roads are not capable of carrying those things to the markets. Your rail system is imploding. So I think as a start, we need to address our infrastructure throughout the African continent so that people are in a position to export and to import whatever they need.
Thank you, Crystal. Francis?
You're muted, Francis.
Thank you. Had to happen at some point. I wanted to share a success story on the infrastructure piece, because there's a great story of a company in the Klein Karoo, which is in Western Cape. They received a grant from the US government to put into a juicing factory for pomegranate juice. And the district municipality have invested over 60 million rand in the road that links that factory to the tar road to Oudtshoorn and Carlitsdorp. And I think it's just such a powerful story because it does demonstrate how important the infrastructure is, as Christo says, but then also how, if we can collaborate and co-invest, we can really leverage resources that are there to create jobs and build models that really bring value. So very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francis. Links now. I think my biggest takeaway from this call is there are so many wonderful things happening that we don't know about. I often hear in various summits and conversations like this, people sharing that, they're frustrated here or there. And so much of this is about awareness and realizing that there are resources. Do you mind sharing your email or reference point into the chat, Francis? Because I really want people to start taking a shot, reaching out to you guys and go, okay, cool. This is the idea I have. I have people in my network who I could develop a consortium with to reach out and begin exploring. Because sometimes this thing is about what I call strategic iteration, where the first phase is going, okay, who's in my network? that I can collaborate with on a particular low-hanging fruit, excuse the pun. Second is we reach out to someone like Francis, Christo, and go, all right, is there viability here? Third phase of the iteration, we go, boom, where are the demand partners in the US, particularly because that's what we're channeling here, and vice versa. Where are the opportunities to import and collaborate, not just export? So, I really want a huge part of this. I want a big takeaway to be, there are challenges, but there are huge opportunities if we think strategically and someone has the willpower to start offering these resources. And I hope that's what you're taking away today, guys. I want to open up. We've got a few more minutes before these guys have to take off for our next conversation. If you have a couple of questions, anybody have any questions for Francis or Christo before they take off? Anybody want to share a little bit about what you're doing? I see a hand raised here. You can go ahead.
I'll send the questions to the chat, Tim.
Okay. Kotso, thank you very much. The question is in the chat. Because of the system that I'm on, I am struggling to see the chat. Do you see it, Francis?
I do see it. It says, hi, Krista and Francis. I hope you're doing well. I'd like to discuss how Aquachem pipes can participate more actively in the agri-sector in South Africa, the SADC region, and the USA. Our company specializes in manufacturing HDPE pipes, which are widely used in agriculture for irrigation and water management. We hold an SABS accreditation and are a trusted manufacturer. Appreciate any guidance on opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah. Perhaps I think it's important to build a relationship with your agricultural companies. There's, for example, VKB, there's AgriCarb, there's Afgri. All of these companies, are big suppliers of whatever is needed on farms. And I think perhaps a good starting point would be AgBiz. AgBiz is the home for most of these agro or corporations. The Afrikaans word koöperasie sounds better, but I think I'll just write down here in the chat box that contact AgBiz for more information. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Anything to add to that, Francis? Or
I think for the South African market, that makes great sense. I think for US, we'd need to just consider the product, how competitive it is, and just explore whether there are any opportunities. It's not a product I know well, but I'm very happy if you want to reach out to me. I did share my email address. We can chat about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have a question from Kanye as well.
Good morning. I hope the panel is well. I would like to just assist because I heard you guys saying because of the system, you're not able to see some of the questions that are in the chat box. So there is one that you guys missed from Tapelo Ram Ulukeng. Tapelo's asking, what about people who raise the issue that South Africa produces a lot of food, is food secure in brackets, but people cannot access the food? And then he continues to ask, how do we then approach that? Is it because of the point that you raised about a lot of people being heavily debt produced, a lot of food rather, being heavily debt produced, or are there perhaps other factors?
I think it's a range of factors. Obviously, for a farmer to get rid of food, so to speak. Okay.
We just need to mute someone.
Yeah.
Number 5 in the queue. Please continue.
Yeah, let's can we okay, cool. That should be it. Thank you.
Okay. It's an expensive exercise because first and foremost, for a farmer then to drive it to a particular point, it is an expensive exercise. But one thing that we have in place in South Africa, we have a massive infrastructure where sort of surplus food or food that is destined for waste is being collected by them, and that is being distributed to various points. Obviously, it is something that we need to expand because food wastage is a severe challenge in South Africa. But there's institutions that focus specifically on this. And I think those institutions should be supported so that the waste distribution becomes more effective and it reaches many more people. But that's one point of the story. The other point of the story, obviously, is that yes, at the national level, we are relatively food secure and we're a net exporter of food. At a local level, and especially in the rural areas, that is the bigger problem. Now, I know that the Department of Agriculture, through their voucher system, they're assisting subsistence farmers to produce their own food, etc., etc. But it remains a challenge. And the funny thing is, if you have a very in-depth look at where hunger is most prevalent, it's in rural provinces where the resources are available. The land is there, the water is there to produce food. And I also tried to figure out, what is the reason that people cannot exploit those resources to become more food secure. But that is a different conversation altogether.
Yeah. Well, Christo, thank you so much. Give us your 15-second close, and then Francis, afterwards, give your 15-second close, and then I'm going to say goodbye to both of you.
For me, the important thing is we need to take care of nature because nature takes care of us. Yes, there's a lot of people that says climate change is, something that is not real. But if I look at my own environment and I see the amount of pollution, polluted water, polluted areas, if I look at how we pollute the sky, that for me is the bigger concern, and how we destroy natural ecosystems in our pursuit of short-term profits and so forth. I think we need to learn as a people to live in harmony with nature, and nature will take care of us if we take care of nature.
Christo, thank you very much. Francis?
Timothy, I think I just want to reflect in the last 2 months since I've joined the trade desk, I've met so many companies and people, and I am just so inspired by the amount of innovation, the incredible businesses that we have in South Africa and on the continent. And I couldn't help but hear a message on the radio the other day that really resonated with me, with a professor that was talking about a young doctor in Limpopo that came up with a vaccination for tuberculosis. And he just was lauding the resilience and innovation and the ability of people to overcome adversity and to be resilient and creative. So keep up the great work, all the businesses out there. I know it's not easy, but you're amazing and inspiring.
Thank you so much, Francis. And thank you for being open to share your details. Christo, thank you so much for the rigor in your academic work. Francis, I look forward to seeing what you guys do. I know you guys are new, but I know you have the willpower to really continue pioneering and supporting our trade efforts on that side.